Welcome into the Faceless Truth Reactions. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It helps us grow a lot. Now, let's get on with the show.
Breaking news coverage. I'm Harris Falkner. You are in the Falkner Focus. Right now, FBI whistleblowers are testifying before a House panel. And a bit of a break, and we'll get back to them. They're accusing the agency of retaliation and abusing the agency's power. The men who've come forward are highly decorated, yet their allegations include sustained campaigns of humiliation and intimidation. Again, we'll get back to the House Weaponization Subcommittee's hearing, led by Chairman Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, set to resume at any moment. When it does, we'll take it live. What happened to these FBI agents? Caught up in alleged political targeting by FBI leadership? Well, one agent says he was placed on unpaid suspension on the first day of a brand new assignment. The Weaponization Subcommittee says today's testimony is the human evidence of what it calls institutional rot and anti-conservative bias at the highest levels of government.
Politics is driving the agenda in federal agencies. Parents attending a school board meeting, pro-lifers praying at a clinic, or Catholics simply attending Mass, you could be a target.
To shut down differing viewpoints is the end of any analytical or investigative body. It sends a chilling effect across the workforce and does not allow for intellectual freedom, which is vital to any investigative body.
It's up to members of this committee, current and former FBI employees, and indeed all Americans, to ensure that the weaponization of our own government against the people comes to an end, no matter the personal cost.
Republican Senator Rand Paul of the great state of Kentucky, ranking member on Senate Homeland Security Committee, is in focus. First, we will go to David Spunt at the Justice Department, the DOJ, the boss of the FBI. David.
That's exactly right, Harris. No surprise you could cut the tension with a knife in this hearing room. Three FBI whistleblowers before Congress today, all making their separate allegations. And I actually got a hold of a letter from the FBI to Congress sent to Republicans and Democrats explaining why these men lost their security clearances.
The FBI suspended my security clearance, accusing me of actually being disloyal to my country. This outrageous and insulting accusation is based on unsubstantiated accusations that I hold conspiratorial views regarding the events of January 6, 2021, and that I allegedly sympathize with criminal conduct. I do not.
According to Marcus Allen's FBI file, as one example, on September 29, 2021, Allen sent an email using his FBI email account to multiple colleagues that contained links to websites and urged recipients to, quote, exercise extreme caution and discretion in pursuit of any investigative inquiries or leads pertaining to the events of January 6th. Harris, Stephen Friend is another witness who says his name has been damaged by the Bureau. Listen.
You may think I'm a political partisan. You may think I am a grifter. You may think I'm a conspiracy theorist. It does not matter. Simply put, this committee should avoid the temptation to impugn the character and the motivations of the messengers seated before you.
But according to his FBI file, on September 3rd of last year, Friend entered FBI space and downloaded documents from FBI computer systems to an unauthorized removable flash drive. The FBI then required Mr. Friend to attend a security awareness briefing regarding his actions, but he refused to do so. The file says he also gave an interview with Russian government state television, and he was not approved to do so. But these whistleblowers say they were retaliated against. The hearing continues momentarily. Harris.
David Spunt, thank you for getting us started. From Capitol Hill now,
You're welcome.
Senator Rand Paul, the top Republican on the Senate Homeland Security Committee and member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Great to have you in focus today.
Good morning.
There's been a lot to go on in that hearing across chamber from you. I would imagine everybody's watching it. Your top line thoughts.
You know, as I travel the country and I meet people come up to me every day and they are worried that there's two sets of justice. That, you know, for Paul Manafort, you go to jail for life. For Hunter Biden, there's never even an indictment. So people are very, very concerned. We give our law enforcement, particularly the FBI, our intelligence agency, they have the tools to look into every aspect of our life, to thoroughly go where no one is supposed to go. and they need to be unbiased. It needs to be based on probable cause on the Constitution. But it turns out we learned that in the Trump administration and the Trump campaign they went after, they didn't even use the Constitution. They used what's called the FISA, or Foreign Intelligence Court, which doesn't have to obey the Constitution and has a lower standard than the Fourth Amendment. So this is very, very worrisome. I think people are upset by it, and I frankly think the hearings are a good idea.
So what are you learning about these whistleblowers and their alleged plight that maybe is somewhat surprising to you? And one of the things I would ask you to point to is this idea that they get treated differently than whistleblowers per other agencies in one single federal government.
Yeah, I think that's true. Typically, the left has been receptive and open to whistleblowers. I, as a conservative, am open and would like to hear from whistleblowers because I think they can tell us about malfeasance within government. In fact, the most famous whistleblower in the COVID investigation was a major who released a research document that said that the Chinese, with our help, were actually trying to develop the virus that looked suspiciously like what COVID-19 became. And that was a blockbuster and actually had a lot of people rethinking whether the virus came from a lab. So whistleblowers are incredibly important, and we should hear from them. But the weaponization of the FBI policing speech at Twitter, the FBI paying $3 million to Twitter to take down constitutionally protected speech, these are things that have to be evaluated. My hope is that at some point in time, the left traditionally was good at defending the First Amendment. When will they step up and say it's wrong for the FBI to be shutting down content on Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah, and when will they deal with the topic that came up today in the hearing, and that is that in other agencies, whistleblowers are protected in a much more vigorous way, I think is a fair way to put it, than at the FBI. I mean, the rules are different for people who come forward.
Yeah, people are asking me why the people who broke the rules to go after Trump, we had, what, $50 million investigation, the Mueller investigation, it all turned out to be based on campaign documents that Hillary Clinton got that were probably given to her by Russians. The actual Russian collusion was with the Hillary Clinton campaign, the opposite of what they promoted. And yet, did anybody pay a price? So they weaponized the FBI, not just to torment an individual, they weaponized it to destroy an entire political party and a national nominee. And so this is incredibly worrisome. Something's got to give. But the people come up to me and say, why aren't they in jail? Well, they're not in jail because they're being protected by the Biden administration.
Well, and when you say something's got to give, Americans are looking for some form of what we would all get if we had done the same thing. And it's adjudication, accountability, so on and so forth. Real quickly, I'm going to ask my team to put this up. Mark Houck is a Catholic pro-life activist accused of shoving an abortion clinic worker, or volunteer, excuse me. The FBI's bias is what he says he felt firsthand when they raided his home after an incident. Here he was with me in Focus.
I totally was surprised by the amount of force that was brought to bear. My children and I witnessed this. We've lived a horror, and we're still trying to deal with the effects of it.
What do you tell your 7 children?
I encourage them to engage the culture, and that's why we go to the pro-life prayer vigils as a family. We must go and stand in the marketplace and bring light into those dark places, and to not be afraid, to have the courage, and to be willing to use our First Amendment rights, and to speak, and to share love and compassion.
I mean, his recent testimony right there on Capitol Hill, you saw Senator Mike Johnson alongside of him. These whistleblowers, or just American citizens who go through things, what are they in your eyes? How would you describe them?
Martyrs, but I'm also saddened that a man who believes that life is sacred, that God created us, we were created in the image of God, that there's something special about humans, something special about life, is hounded by a police force, by a government police force. And realize this is not brand new. Ever since 9/11, they came up with this idea, we need to share information. So then they had these fusion centers, but then they had profiles. And within the profiles of sharing information supposedly for terrorism, they included people like this gentleman. Pro-life was seen as an issue that somehow was a danger. This is a signal of danger. If someone has a pro-life sticker on their car, or if they believe in the Constitution.
Or they go to a Latin Mass.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
They're
a recent
conservative
example.
Catholic. Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. But this is where we are. The world's been turned upside down, but there are people kidnapping, shooting, raping that are being released from prison. And meanwhile, the government seems to have enough time to harass, a godly man with 7 kids who just wants to talk about the sacredness of life.
Yeah. Since 9/11, you gave us some new details on kind of when we need to look back and see how things started, sort of the origins, if you will, of where we are now. I want to move to this. 6 Democratic senators, including Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, calling on President Biden to cease negotiations with Republicans and use the power of the 14th Amendment to raise the debt ceiling without congressional approval. Republicans, on the other hand, are laying into the president for jetting off to Japan for the G7 ahead of that June 1st debt deadline. Now just a couple of weeks away. Let's watch.
Here we are on the brink of a Biden default. And I think we saw the helicopters going across here. And I said, I think he's leaving now to go to Japan. I'm like, stop.
Mr. President, cancel your trip to Japan. Stay at the table.
America wants an American president focused on American problems.
What's your reaction, Senator?
I think it's irresponsible to raise the debt ceiling without having any kind of spending reform. It's irresponsible of Biden to continue to say he won't negotiate, even while he is negotiating. It's irresponsible of him to leave the country with the job not done. The only reason we're facing a deadline is because he has for 3 months said he won't negotiate. And he is negotiating now, but he wasted 3 months, and he's pushing it up against the deadline. The other thing people need to know, though, is this is somewhat of a contrived controversy. The government brings in $4.8 trillion in taxes. The interest payment's a little over $400 billion. We have plenty of money coming in every day to pay our interest payments. We would just have to cut spending elsewhere. So this is about Democrats and some Republicans, frankly, not wanting to cut any spending. So we have to raise the debt ceiling because they're unwilling to cut spending. But we're spending $1 trillion more than comes in. They have to cut spending, and it needs to be part of the leverage we use is to get spending caps through raising the debt ceiling.
I tell you, if this doesn't get done, it looks like Democrats will wear this one. Republicans put a deal on the table. They stayed at the table. The president allocated some responsibilities to different people, delegated them, and then took off. We'll cover the news as it happens. Senator Rand Paul in Focus today. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Border Patrol out with record-shattering new numbers, raising concerns about just how dire the situation could get now that Title 42's expulsion, driven by COVID, that Trump-era principle and measure are gone. Texas Governor Greg Abbott in Focus next. Plus, White House officials are in some hot water for saying this.
These are our kids.
They are our children. They are the children of our country.
Our nation's children are all our children.
No, our children are ours. Parents are furious over this. Some telling the U.S. government to back off when it comes to their own kids. Power panel next. Fox News alert. Stunning numbers show a surge of illegal immigrants at the southern border last month. Customs and Border Protection reporting now that there were more than 211,000 illegals caught in April. That is a 10% jump from March. And that was just before Title 42 expired 1 week ago today. The CBP also reports it captured a staggering 16 people on the FBI's terror watch list. That's more than all of fiscal year 2017 through 2020 combined. Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs says don't forget about the gotaways.
The bigger problem is we don't know who they didn't interdict. We don't know whether they're terrorists. We don't know if they're criminal gang members. We don't know if they're bringing drugs across. We don't know if they're bringing children in sex and human trafficking cases. It's a massive problem.
Border communities are now all over the United States, but particularly those states along the southern border with Mexico, they're struggling particularly hard. In El Paso, Texas, illegal immigrants sleeping in the streets and thousands more waiting right across the border in Mexico. Officials there say they are now, the weather has cleared, bracing for the worst.
Desperate, and they're going to try to cross in an irregular fashion. that being either, coming across the river or going out into the desert or trying to jump over the wall, which are all very, very dangerous.
Republican Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. Governor, first of all, tell me how things are going right now.
Well, things have changed a little bit because of what we showed last week, and that is the Texas National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety are now repelling illegal immigrants who are trying to cross the border. So it's causing the cartels to have to recalibrate what they're doing. They're holding tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people back, trying to figure out where and how to go as they cross the border. So it's just a chess match right now with the cartels. That said, one thing that we're doing as we speak is to add more National Guard and DPS officers on the front lines of the border, as well as add more of those razor wire border walls and fences to make sure that we're going to be able to prevent people from entering Texas illegally.
So I pointed this out last week, and I said that some of the numbers should come down because of what you're doing. And at one point, I remember you were deploying like 10,000 Texas National Guards. I mean, earlier in the process. So what you're doing is making a difference. I haven't heard it. Do you have the full-throated public support from the federal government giving you credit and an attaboy for what's going on down there?
To the contrary, Joe Biden was asked about it, I think, yesterday or the day before, and he scoffed about it. But the fact of the matter is there's only one governmental entity in the entire United States of America that is repelling people who are trying to enter illegally, and that's the state of Texas.
Wow. The CDC is reporting that nearly 110,000 Americans have died from drug overdoses in 2022, becoming the deadliest year on record. I know your state of Texas. The Senate there just passed a bill allowing for murder charges to be brought in certain fentanyl-related deaths. How will that work?
Well, first, to show the magnitude of the problem, Texas law enforcement alone has seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the entire United States of America. This is a potential catastrophe for the country, and there has to be consequences for it. One of the consequences that we are adding is to create a murder charge for someone who laces some other type of drug with fentanyl, which is what happens all the time, and a person uses it and dies from it. So we're converting an overdose to a poisoning finding and classifying it as murder, and we'll prosecute as murder so we can put these deadly either cartel members or their counterparts here in the state of Texas behind bars.
You know, I know your state is doing sort of specific work where this is. You've got a special lab that your DPS has told me about. Just real quickly, how much more do you think the federal government could be doing? I mean, have they visited that lab?
They have not. And so you say, how much more could they do? The first thing they do would be the most that they have done. They're not really stepping up and doing anything that I have seen to try to stop the inflow of fentanyl. Remember that the component parts of fentanyl come from China. And they're used by drug cartels in Mexico to lace onto other drugs that are then sold in the United States. Biden should be fighting on the front lines against China, against Mexico, with regard to people in the United States being poisoned. I have seen nothing from the Biden administration fighting back against these countries for the poisoning and killing of Americans.
Look, he'd have to add that spy craft that flew over the entire continental U.S. To the list of things to hold China accountable for. Last week I read he's not likely to even do that, going to give them a pass. Let me move to this. The Texas state legislature, again, passed a bill that would ban doctors from providing gender-affirming care to children. It's now headed to your desk, Governor. And right now there are similar laws on the books in several other red states. We're going to put up the map for everybody to see. If it's signed into law in your state, it would become the largest state to ban these procedures for minor children. These are young kids, Governor.
So listen, I'm not going to make any secret about it. I'll be signing it. And Harris, this is about protecting children. Now, remember this, and that is a person under the age of 18, they don't have the mental capacity to make a life-changing decision to lose their sex organs. In the state of Texas, if you're under the age of 18, you can't get a tattoo, you can't buy cigarettes, and so many other things, but people think that they should be able to make a decision to permanently alter their sex organs. That's just outrageous. In Texas, we believe that cutting off a child's sex organs is child abuse, and it's going to be treated that way by law.
Well, and you've got that added situation in some states that says you don't even have to tell your parents. I've interviewed a couple of those parents who found out that their kids were being exposed to things at secret clubs and whatnot at schools, elementary age kids, 6th graders. So I'm sure that it will encompass some of that as well. That's a big discussion. And you said, you make no bones about it, you're going to sign that bill into law. Governor, good to see you.
It'll be done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harris.
Well, we are looking right now, and I'm going to ask my team how far away we are from the subcommittee on weaponization of the federal government. They will let me know when that resumes. For now, while red states are taking action to protect minors from life-changing surgeries, as you just heard the governor talking about, the governor of Texas, some blue states are taking the opposite approach. One agency in Massachusetts wants to punish parents who don't let their kids get transgender treatment and surgeries. Plus, President Biden looking to go very green in 2024 in an attempt to appeal to younger voters, he thinks. Will that work? I thought he meant the green about putting some money in people's pockets because prices are so high. No. His approval among that group, by the way, is falling fast. Power panel next.
I'm not going to make any secret about it. I'll be signing it. And Harris, this is about protecting children.
That's Governor Abbott of Texas just seconds ago in Focus. In fact, he says the state is about to have a law, because he'll sign it, banning children under age 18 from undergoing gender transition procedures like surgery and puberty blockers. It's a very different story, though, in Democrat-led Massachusetts, where a state agency wants to punish parents who won't let their minor children get treatments. The Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQ Youth calling on the Democratic governor and Dem-led legislature to, quote, improve Massachusetts child abuse laws to explicitly include the withholding of gender-affirming care for LGBTQ youth. Molly Line has the story. Massachusetts potentially going to look very different than the state of Texas.
It is interesting to watch as this all begins to unfold. And I want to talk a little bit about the state agency, the Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQ Youth. They essentially make recommendations to all the government branches. They're an independent agency. And in this latest report, they advise, the agency raises, quote, concerns about the well-being of trans and gender-expansive youth in the home, advising the state examine current laws around child abuse and welfare, suggesting steps toward codifying gender-affirming child welfare protections in state law. Now, the commission urges expanding coverage for gender-affirming care and increasing reimbursement to incentivize care. Citing the World Health Organization, the commission notes gender-affirming care includes social, psychological, and medical interventions. In 2022, the report notes that Republican Governor Charlie Baker signed a law that included protections for gender-affirming care in Massachusetts, but the agency laments the opposite happening elsewhere, noting 18 states considered or passed legislation banning gender-affirming care, and lawmakers introduced some 306 bills specifically targeting transgender communities, a trend the commission says has exploded in 2023. Harris?
Molly Line, thank you very much. You know that we will stay on this. It's likely going to be a topic into 2024, no doubt. Thank you. We want to take you back now to the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. And right now is Congressman Darrell Issa, Republican of California, talking with one of those whistleblowers from the FBI who say that they were retaliated against and humiliated and intimidated after speaking up and speaking out. Let's watch live on Capitol Hill.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley.
Thank you.
And I just would point out, I think this is the first time our sympathies are with your staff. I know you had that terrible incident that happened, so you'll get your full 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I really appreciate that. I must say, my friend from California, I don't know where this concern for whistleblowers and protecting whistleblowers was in the Ukraine episode in that perfect phone call Donald Trump had with President Zelensky, in which a whistleblower, Colonel Vindman, was in fact subsequently punished for reporting on that phone call, which led to the impeachment of the President of the United States. So wouldn't it be nice if we were consistent on our concerns about whistleblowers?
Would the gentleman
No,
yield?
I will not. Mr. Levitt, I have 5 minutes and I haven't got time. Mr. Levitt, you represent an organization, you're president of the organization called Empower Oversight, is that correct?
Yes.
And Empower Oversight represents an FBI agent or a former FBI agent, Mr. George Hill, whom we heard from a little earlier.
Well, no, actually. Mr. Hill did not have counsel for his transcribed interview, so my partner, Jason Foster, agreed to sit in on his interview just for procedural.
Okay, so you were sort of like a surrogate counsel, but not formally. You have no formal relationship with Mr. Hill?
Correct.
But why did you choose to help him in a deposition?
Well, I didn't. Again, my partner, Jason Foster, we were informed that he didn't have any counsel, and both of us have experience sitting in many congressional transcribed interviews.
And your view is he is also a valid whistleblower?
Again, he's not my client. I can't speak to his claims. I do have the view that going out and, again, the idea, attacking someone saying you haven't yet been given the magic wand of whistleblower status, I believe that's inappropriate. I'm not familiar with all of the substance of his personnel actions.
Huh. Well, might it cause you some concern? Let me show some tweets on the screen from Mr. Hill. This one, he had theories about January 6th that it was instigated by the deep state, not by insurrectionists who were up to no good seeking to hang the vice president, Republican vice president, I might add, of the United States, or other depredations. It was the deep state that led to this. Are you familiar with that tweet?
No.
Here's another one. Are you familiar with this tweet? In which he talked again that the deep state is real on the January 6th insurrection.
Just to be clear, I'm not familiar with any of his tweets. We just believe that it can be helpful for people to have counsel, and we were willing to assist in that way.
Well, but isn't it also helpful to kind of know a little bit of background when you are providing counsel?
We were just there for the procedural counsel of the interview, not to represent him and all his interests.
I understand, but wouldn't you want to be curious about his status and what led him to be?
I'm sure it's quite possible that my co-counsel, Jason Foster, is familiar with these. I literally wasn't even an employee of Empower at that time. I was still sitting on the Merit Systems Protection Board.
And what's your view? Do you believe that January 6th was instigated by the deep state?
Define the deep state, sir.
I don't know.
I sure don't either.
Oh, good. All right.
Great question.
Because it is a phrase frequently used by the former president of the United States, so it's out there. But you don't know what it means.
Obviously, at the Merit Systems Protection Board, we dealt with people at all layers of bureaucracy.
Well, I actually kind of share that with you. I don't know what it means either. I think it's kind of made up, like a boogeyman, so that we can use it as a catch-all. I must say, on this hearing, y'all have employment grievances. That doesn't make you whistleblowers. And maybe those grievances are legitimate, or maybe some aspects of it are legitimate, and all of you have careers, and I'm sorry for the situation in which you find yourselves, but this is not a forum for individual members of any agency, federal agency, unless there's a broad pattern of discrimination or violation of law, to air their grievances, their employment grievances. And I must say, listening to this hearing, I don't walk away convinced of anything other than we're listening to sad tales of certain individuals about their situation. And the enumeration of grievances does not constitute whistleblower status. And I'm not quite sure why we had this hearing. I certainly don't think it proves some consistent pattern of wrongdoing by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I've heard some things here that run counter to the history of the FBI. The gentlelady, I think from Florida, said like a new idea that they got in the intelligence business that would have come as news to J. Edgar Hoover, who loved intelligence and in fact preferred it over some forms of law enforcement. Had a whole network in South America he had to dismantle when President Truman told him he had to get out of that business. So thank you for being here, but I must tell you I leave more skeptical and with more questions about the nature of this hearing than I began. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a very short point of privilege. For the record, I left Congress in 2019 and returned in 2021. I believe the gentleman saw an absence of conduct by me when I wasn't in Congress.
I must say, I'm so fond of my friend from California. It was like he was still here.
And I thank my good friend from Virginia. Yield back.
Yeah, and I would just point out before I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana that just for the committee's benefit, Mr. Vindman was not the whistleblower.
Mr. Chairman.
But he was retaliated against for testifying pursuant to a lawful
remained
subpoena.
anonymous, and unlike Mr. Allen, we never saw Mr. Allen's willingness to give us the transcript. We never saw the transcript from the anonymous whistleblower.
What are you talking about? There was a complaint that was publicly disclosed.
Mr. Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman made statement. Well, I've already recognized Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Democrats, our friends on the other side of the aisle, are trying their best to obscure the purpose of this hearing and to pretend like they don't understand the meaning of it. Here it is. Activists in the FBI and the Department of Justice have weaponized the full weight of their agencies against everyday Americans. It's alarming. The examples that have been highlighted by this committee are shocking to the sensibilities of all the people that we represent, and they want us to get action and answers and accountability. The FBI, here's a couple of examples. The FBI sought to label concerned parents at school board meetings domestic terrorists. We know that they sought to recruit spies and informants inside the congregations of traditional Catholic churches. We know that they worked with the social media platforms hand in hand, almost as partners over the last 2 election cycles, to censor and silence conservatives online that they disagreed with. Sometimes they were candidates. And now the people at this table who are patriots, who this bothered their consciences, who knew that this was against their oaths of service and their duty, spoke up, and they're being retaliated against. Mr. O'Boyle, I wanted to just discuss one of these examples. In your transcribed interview with committee members, you stated that federal law enforcement involvement at school board meetings would, in your words, absolutely chill parents from exercising their First Amendment rights. Can you explain a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Yes, so one of the examples given in the congressional letter included an example where a neighbor or somehow someone knew a parent that they believed was extreme, and so they called the FBI and reported that parent to the FBI. When citizens in this country get to a point where they can call the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world on their neighbor just because they disagree with them, that is chilling to the First Amendment rights of the people who are getting the FBI called on them.
That is absolutely right. The parents who are concerned about their kids' education have a right to come to the school board meeting and express those sentiments, and they should not have fear of the federal government investigating them or doing, as you testified and explained to us, that the FBI counterterrorism and criminal divisions came together to create a unique threat tag to label these parents domestic terrorists. Mr. O'Boyle, is it accurate to say that you tried to fix all these issues within the FBI through the chain of command, and that it was only after no action was taken that then you came forward to Congress to disclose this information?
It's accurate that we did discuss it at the squad level, but the FBI is set up in a way where line agents like me or line supervisors even, they're not going to be able to accomplish fixing such a vast problem from the inside of the FBI.
And what you've done is exactly what federal law requires of you. We recognize, as was said here a moment ago, we recognize and protect whistleblowers for their patriotic duty. Why? Because it's essential to maintain the rule of law and to make sure that corruption does not fester throughout the government. And isn't it true that once the FBI found out you spoke to Congress, that your security clearance was then suspended?
Yes, I believe that's what happened.
And what effect has this had on your ability to provide for your young family?
I've since had to rely on charity because the FBI stopped paying me, and there's no other way for me to make a living. I know from other whistleblowers that the FBI routinely denies them the ability to get outside employment, and then as a special agent, you can only make $7,500 a year outside of your government salary. So you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place, because on one hand, we want to try to get our jobs back because we are trying to do our patriotic duty. But on the other hand, we still have families to take care for. It's essentially a death sentence in the modern era.
Yeah, talk about a chilling effect, right? Not only have we chilled the rights of parents to go and express their views, any other whistleblower better take note, right? They better take note. You may not be able to feed your family. It's disgusting. Your security clearance was wrongfully suspended. You have no recourse, right? Because here's the thing. If you wrongfully strip clearances, the FBI is the one that you appeal to, right? The FBI is supposed to investigate itself. Is that right?
That's correct.
I just want everybody to understand, I only got 40 seconds left. The FBI investigating itself. This is why we're here, folks. This committee, we have jurisdiction over the Department of Justice, over the FBI. We are the checks and balances in the system. We have to draw this attention to this because it's our oversight duty. We're all trying to fulfill our responsibilities and our patriotic duties here. I am grateful to you men for your willingness to stand forward and take the arrows as you have, even from members of Congress over here who are trying to disparage you. It's disgusting. I thank you for your patriotic responsibility. Look, the free speech of parents is chilled. The speech and the duty of whistleblowers is chilled. We got a problem, folks, and we're trying to fix it. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The committee will be in order. Members of the audience should refrain from any type of applause or anything. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia for unanimous consent.
I thank the chair. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the interview of George Hill dated February 7th with the Judiciary Committee, in which he explicitly identifies.
All righty, so we are seeing some fireworks inside this subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, and not the least of which you saw Representative Mike Johnson, who was on this very program alongside our guest at the time, who was that father of 7, who the FBI raided his house. He's pro-life, he's strong Christian. He believes it was over his beliefs, and all that played out in the early morning hours on a beautiful September morning. He said they were terrified. The kids saw that. So you're hearing from some of those in the House right now, leadership and the others among Republicans, who can give some present-day examples of things that are going on with the weaponization of the government. And then there's some friction with Democrats who really want to take everything back. I mean, how many times have we heard Donald Trump's name just from the previous Democrat who was on, not Ms. Garcia right here. So we'll continue to monitor that. We have an opportunity to show you a couple of things before the Falkner Focus wraps, and so we'll do that. Go right back if news is breaking. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre facing some serious backlash for saying this about our kids.
I've met a lot of parents of trans kids in the past couple of months who have told me these devastating stories, saying how they now have to seriously consider leaving their state to protect their child. And that's something that we have to call out. These are kids. These are our kids. They belong to all of us.
No, I don't even think she has children, but I really don't know. Mine are mine. Hers would be hers. White House, though, this is a familiar refrain.
No such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.
When you see our kids, and I truly believe that they are our children, they are the children of our country, of our communities.
Outrage on Twitter. Democrats, from the president to the local level, are fighting to prevent parents from being able to protect our own children. And this, no parent wants to hear the government tell them their kids are not theirs. But that's what they're doing. Quote. Power panel, Jason Riley, Fox News contributor, Wall Street Journal columnist. Patrick Murphy, former Pennsylvania congressman, former undersecretary of the Army, and first Iraq war veteran elected to Congress. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. Great to see you both. Wow. I need a Democrat perspective on why the Democrat Party wants to babysit a bunch of children that are not theirs. Patrick.
Harris, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I do think, though, that when you have 24% of young Americans, teenagers, that think they're better off dead, that's a mental health issue. We got to do better. I know you're a mom. I'm a father of 2 kids. It does take a village. We got to be in there for each other, whether you are blessed with children or not. We got to do more to make sure our kids aren't dying by suicide, to make sure they know we need them here in America. We need them to be part of our lives because they are the blessings that God has given all of us.
Absolutely. Your example, though, I believe was in an adult age, but that's okay. They're always our babies. Jason, what's your take on this?
Well, obviously, children belong to parents first and foremost, and I think millions of American loving parents, caring parents resent their children being treated like wards of the state. And I think the big concern here is that teachers and administrators in school are undermining not only the authority of parents, but the values of parents. As you mentioned earlier, Harris, you hear story after story of boys wanting to be identified as girls or vice versa, and the parents being kept entirely in the dark about this. And I think that is what is really frustrating here. We send our kids to school to learn how to read and write and do math, and most of them cannot do that at grade level. You would think the schools would be focused on doing that job first before turning to these gender issues.
I'm going to double back and go in reverse here. Jason, why do you think that the rhetoric, and I call it that because I haven't seen the actions match it. It's not like the president and the first lady and KJP with the White House press secretary. It's not like they're showing up at schools and offering to watch kids in an after-school program and make sure they're fed and read to them on a regular basis, tuck them in at night and pay their bills. So why say they take ownership at this point?
I think this is about appeasing the far left of the Democratic Party. This is what the progressives want the focus to be on, and I think you see the president and the White House press secretary following suit, throwing them a bone, playing up this issue. I think that is exactly what is going on here. It's another example of the progressive tail wagging the dog here in the Democratic Party.
Do they just want control? I'm just trying to figure out why. And you know what, Patrick Murphy, I really understand what you say in terms of mental health. It is a problem. The HHS secretary has said it. The U.S. Surgeon General Murty has said it. He said that isolation and depression are so problematic among particularly our young teenagers. So I get that. But that's not necessarily what's being talked about. We're talking about surgeries for transgender minors and that sort of thing.
And we're talking about that, and I know the earlier segment talked about that as well, but I think when you look at the broader picture, we got to unify our country. We have to be strong from within. And our kids are hurting, whether they're part of the LGBTQ community or not. They
Do you want the government watching your kids? Because I don't.
No, I watch my kids. I mean, I'm blessed. My mom's going to pick my son up at school, at the Catholic school he goes to in a couple hours. But I do think we got to unify, and we got to devote more resources to make sure parents feel accountable, responsible, because they're the ultimate authority. But we got to make sure we invest in schools. We invest in our children. We have to be competing against China and other countries, so we got to get after it when it comes to math and science and STEM and et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and I hear you both saying that about the education. It's just, how do you get that done? And since we sat home in lockdown as parents across the country, and I live in Cobalt Blue, New Jersey, so it wasn't an option unless you were going to a private school, a colloquial school, if you were blessed enough to do that. We're pretty good at sitting alongside our students. We're pretty good at that and understanding how to get them to that next level. So I'm glad that as a Democrat you want us at the table. Not everybody does. The DOJ, FBI, unions. We'll talk next time. Gentlemen, great to see you. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's keep it with the parents now. A growing list of towns outside of New York City in states of emergency right now over the influx of illegal immigrants coming from the southern border. New York City, sanctuary that it is crippled, so the mayor says, after receiving nearly 61,000 people from the border just since last spring. They get that much per week, per day in some areas on the border. But here are those, those areas where they're sending them into other counties outside of the biggest city in America. They're trying any and all options to house them, the mayor says, including a controversial plan to use school gymnasiums. Officials found out how badly that would track with parents, though, when they moved some of the migrants into the gyms and then had to move them out after parent outrage.
There are people staying in the gymnasium, people that they don't know, strangers, and they're in close proximity to their kids. So as a parent, any parent that has kids will know that's frustrating and it's scary.
It's the scary part that's the problem, right? Miguel Chico has 3 beautiful daughters, 2 of them in PS 172 in Brooklyn. Now, we know that school because that's where illegal immigrants were housed until yesterday. Mr. Chico, the parents won.
Yes.
What did you do?
To be honest, we have nothing against the immigrants. I come from immigrant parents, the community is full of Hispanics. We just believe that school gymnasium isn't a place to put these people in. It's just not a place for them. The gymnasium was built for the children so they can have an education and they can have their gym. It's not a place for them to be put.
How did you make your voice heard on that? I see some people in the video that we're showing with signs, so on and so forth. I mean, they didn't come to you and ask if you could do this. They just did it.
They just did it overnight. From what I heard, it was over a weekend, like Mother's Day weekend. They just came, they put some of the cots there, and we've all found out, all the parents found out Monday morning.
Were you one of the parents who decided to keep your kid home, your children, your beautiful 2 daughters who were at PS 172 until they solved this? Because that was some pressure.
Yes, I was. Absolutely.
And who did you speak to? How did that go down? Because it happened so quickly. You got somebody's attention.
All the parents from the PTA organization, they just got together, and we just all met out in front of the school, and we just organized and just protested and explained and made sure our voices was heard.
The concern over children met by the voices of parents. And your little girls, what did you tell them?
Basically, we told our girls that no matter what, we still have to treat these people like human beings, because at the end of the day, they are human beings. But a school gymnasium isn't a proper place for them to be placed. They need to be placed in an environment where it's healthy for them, where it's safe for them, where they can have fresh water, they can sleep comfortable. A school gymnasium isn't a proper place to put these people.
Well, the parents are coming out victoriously on this particular thing having to do with children. God bless you and your family, Miguel Chico. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Outnumbered after the break.